So good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be with you. This is a fascinating format that we have today, and I'm going to go through a quick presentation, probably 20 or 25 minutes, leaving you plenty of time for questions. You might use the chat or the Q&A sections to ask your questions, but the fun part of this is to hear from you and hear what questions you have, and look forward to that part. But let me just set the stage and thank you, Mackenzie, for that introduction. Let me just set the stage for who Cox Curry is and why the folks at Chick-fil-A invited us to participate. So we've been doing this in Atlanta and in Georgia for a long time. It's founded in 1954. We've got 38 professionals really trying to help nonprofits attract the resources they need to be successful in achieving their mission. We do everything from annual fund campaigns, capital campaigns, feasibility studies, assessments of all sorts across the development and advancement services of our clients. Our goal is to just help you be more productive in doing what you do the best. We serve a lot of folks in the Atlanta community and in the Georgia community. We occasionally get drug out of state, but one of our differentiating features is the fact that we know the donor market exceptionally well, and we know that market in Georgia really well. We know that market outside of Georgia a lot less well. So we stay pretty focused in the Atlanta and the Georgia market, but there are consulting firms across the country that do things like what we do. So I'm sure you've all had exposure to that, for those of you that are outside of Georgia. Today, I want to talk about just trends in philanthropy. In 2020, it was a fascinating year in philanthropy. It's a fascinating year in every aspect. Fascinating is probably not the best term for it, but it's the most appropriate term I can use on a live show. I want to talk about some fundraising basics. I've got in here how to deplete, not that you want to deplete your donor base, but it sets the stage for how you want to grow your donor base. And then talk a little bit about planning and goal setting, and once again, leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So Giving USA does a great survey every year. We have not gotten the final results for 2020, so I'm going to show you some 2019 results, and I'll allude to what I think is going to happen with the 2020 results, which should be released in about a month. It was $450 billion given away in this country last year to nonprofits. The vast majority that came from individuals. 70% of the money is donated by individuals. We hear a lot of folks saying, gosh, I want to get to those corporations. I want to get to those foundations. And we say, great, but do not forget, individuals account for the vast majority of philanthropic support. We're showing 70% in individuals. If you look, we also have 10% in bequests, which obviously are coming from individuals that have passed away. And then in foundations, that would include family foundations, that includes donor advised funds that individuals could have set up. So in aggregate, individuals probably account for about 85% of all giving. Institutional foundations represent about 10% and corporations represent about 5%. So don't, if you hear anything today, make sure you pay a lot of attention to building your individual donor base. How has that money been distributed and how is it changing over time? The single largest recipient in the sector that gets the most money out of philanthropy is the religion. Mostly churches. This would fall into organized churches, synagogues, mosques. That represents about 30%. And in fact, it says 29%. It's the first year it's gone below 30% in recorded history. It has had a downward trend. About 12 years ago, that number was a lot closer to 40%. And so who's picking up the slack there? Education, human services. I think what you're going to see in 2020 numbers when they come out is you're going to see a lot more going into human services. You're going to see for the first time a fair amount of money going into social justice issues. A lot of dollars were announced. Some were invested in 2020 and more will be invested in 2021. But there's a wide distribution of philanthropy in the community. So the first report that has come out in 2020 is a report from Charitable Giving that showed a 2% increase. I think we're going to see a number that's bigger than that when Giving USA numbers come out. This time last year, if you'd asked me what was going to happen to 2020 philanthropy, I would have said it would have had close to a double-digit decrease. If you remember back in the April-May timeframe of last year, there was a tremendous uncertainty of what was going to happen to the economy, what was going to happen to the stock market, what was going to happen to people's jobs. And while there was a huge impact, at the end of the day, we're going to see philanthropy actually having grown. What we're also going to see is human service organizations, the folks that were providing basic human needs, feeding, clothing, sheltering. They're going to see a pretty significant increase. According to the charitable giving report, that's going to be about a 12% increase in 2020 from 2019. Online giving continues to grow at significant pace. It grew by 21% last year. So people are putting their checkbooks down and using online giving more frequently, and that'll be a trend that has been occurring over the last 5-6 years and will continue to accelerate over time, particularly when you think about 86% of the money coming from individuals. The big area of concern is obviously going to be any event-related activity that you all had planned in 2020 and in 2021. We're starting to see that open back up, but there was some significant challenges, particularly if your events, any events you had planned in the fall. Those spring events that were planned or even the summer events were planned were pretty far down the path before the market changed. And so most of the organizations we do business with were able to maintain a level of funding from the spring events, but really started to feel the pain in late summer and into the fall and early this year. So when I said basic, I'm going to be very basic. Why do people give? This tremendous graphic that we have here, it's really about the heart and head. Everybody has an equation of heart and head. The individuals are probably more leaning towards their heart, but they still are determining, I like to say the heart story and getting to a person's heart has them reaching for their wallet. But they determine how much comes out of their wallet with their head. So the head is going to be critically important. You know, you start with belief in the cause. It feels good to make a gift. The right person makes the ask. I have an expression that I use, and I don't mean it to be a trite expression. People give to people, and a good cause is a bonus. I don't mean to belittle the causes, because the causes are amazing. We get to work with these amazing organizations that run the gamut of 501c3 status. But it's amazing to me how much more likely you're to receive a gift based on who makes the ask versus just the cause itself. So right person makes the ask. They want to show appreciation for the work of the nonprofit, the individual making the ask, appreciation or honor or memorialize somebody who's been important to them, that had a relationship with the organization. Some aspect of it is about recognition. If it's not the full aspect of the gift, it might be making a gift go from one size to another size is sometimes influenced by the recognition that's available. Of course, I think people take advantage of the tax deductibility of the gift. But I really think at the end of the day, one of the most important things is that the person that's making the ask has passion and shows emotion and enthusiasm about the cause. And that is contagious and that is valuable in the process. This is meant as a little bit of a joke here, the cycle of mediocre fundraising. We see it all the time. Everyone acknowledges, all the nonprofits acknowledge the need for fundraising, but then they get caught up, they get overwhelmed with they're a little bit afraid of it. They put it off, they procrastinate. They then settle on gifts that they're receiving and they fall short of their goals, and they start attributing blame to the market, the community, the definitions of what we're trying to do with this particular annual campaign or capital campaign. And they come back, they'll have a huge need for fundraising. They go back through that cycle. That is a cycle you have to avoid. That is a cycle that I just encourage you to try to break that cycle. What does a healthy cycle look like? Well, this is a circle. And one flows into the other, and they're not always linear, but you've got to provide stewardship. If the first visit you're with a prospective donor, you're making an ask, it is unlikely that ask is going to have the same level of success if you haven't provided, understanding of the individual or the corporation or the institution, what their appetite is, what their desires are, what their interests are. Go through that identification and qualification process. Go through a cultivation process. we have some clients who might over cultivate, but most of our clients spend very little time on the cultivation. They go straight to the solicitation, and they might get a gift. They might underperform. That gift might underperform what the opportunity is. So it's a continuous cycle. Think about it. You have all solicited gifts on behalf of your nonprofits. You've also been solicited, and you know what works for you. You're a pretty good barometer of what's going to work for others. So think about stewardship. Think about what's that process of cultivation, solicitation, and then spend some time being grateful and thanking the folks for those gifts before you go back for the next gift, and understand and tell them the success of the gift. One of the frustrating things that we see out of some of our clients is they'll make a solicitation, they'll receive a gift, they'll send a thank you letter, and with the thank you letter is the next solicitation. Try to at least take a pause the next solicitation. Thank them, tell them about the success of the investment that they've made, and go from there. But a little more time can yield far greater results. So you all have annual fundraising goals. You have campaigns that might be capital or comprehensive, programmatically oriented. You need to take some time. This is not a let's go out and do it. Be thoughtful, be deliberate. Think through what it takes to have a successful annual campaign. What are you trying to accomplish with the campaign, and why? How much do you need? Have you identified the sources where the funds are going to come from? How are you adding to your prospect list? What quality or size of gifts do you need to accomplish the goals that you have? How many of those gifts are needed? How many prospects do you have to accomplish your goals? You're not going to have 100% batting average. You're going to need more prospects than you are going to receive in the form of gifts. We typically say 3 to 1 is the relationship that we look for prospects to actual gifts. I try to get a little bit more granular. Gifts aren't all the same size. I love it when we get enthusiastic volunteers from an organization and says they need to raise $100,000 for a particular thing. Great, we're going to go get 100 people to each give $1,000. Or we're going to have 1,000 people give $100. That's not the way fundraising works. You are typically going to be heavily weighted towards the top end of your donor base. On average, 60% of your dollars are going to come from 10% of your donors. The remaining 40% are going to be divided. The percentage between the top donors and the next donors, that 20%, that's going to represent 20% of your donors. It's going to represent 20% of the dollars. The bottom half of your pyramid, 20% of your dollars are going to come from 70% of your donors. So you got to focus on your time, and personal attention really has to be focused on that top 30%. If you're going to reach your goal, that top 30% is going to dictate your success. And it may even be a smaller subset of your donor base. Those need to have the personal touch. They need to be personal asks. When you're out soliciting, an email is a really easy thing to send, and it is a really easier thing for your donor to delete. Writing a letter is interesting, but probably not very successful. Personal asks make a difference. The ability to connect with individuals, providing information via email, via letter is wonderful. Providing different forms of stewardship through both personal touch, social media, electronic touches and emails, those are all great. But when you get down to the solicitation, making an ask in person is going to yield far greater results. We've gone through a pandemic. People have gotten used to Zoom calls. If you're not able to or comfortable getting together with an individual in person, or a corporation or a foundation, Zoom or other forms of virtual connection are helpful and available to you. Continue to use those. I think our donor base is accustomed to them, but personally asking is going to yield the best results. And I would just give you, where you have the opportunity, providing an idea of what you're asking for. In other words, ask for an amount, or use a gift pyramid to say, could you consider being at the top of that major gift category. If you're uncomfortable asking for an amount, ask for a range. This is getting really granular, and this is just showing an example of what a $2.5 million annual campaign, or capital campaign for that matter, is going to typically look like. You see it just in detail here. If this gift pyramid was accurate for you, it would be the first one that was 100% accurate, but they're all directionally accurate. This is generally what it's going to look like in a campaign, something that I'm sure you're very comfortable with, but I thought it would drive home the point of the importance of the top of that, of your donor base. I wish I had $1 or maybe $2 for every time somebody said, Tyler Perry needs to give to this, or Oprah Winfrey, or Dan Cathy. All of those folks are incredibly generous. But what is the linkage that your organization has to a prospective donor? You know, there are 3 parts of this very basic chart. There is the linkage, there's the interest, and there's the ability. And I find that most folks really want to focus. Most of our clients want to focus on the ability. How deep are an individual's pockets, or a corporation's pockets, or a foundation's pockets? That is a very interesting piece of information to know, and you need to have that information. But the ability to make a gift is one component. How do you access that individual, that corporation, that foundation? What's the linkage? And what is their interest in your cause? If you are a private school, an independent school, that is in the tuition is paying for the vast majority of your budget, and you want to do a capital campaign, and that capital campaign is going to involve building a new building on your campus. Well, you can look on the websites of every foundation that's out there, and they'll share with you, are they doing capital? Are they making capital gifts? Are they interested in independent schools? They typically list it, but knowing your target audience and their interest in supporting what you're doing is really important. But then how do you get to them? So you've got a very philanthropic target that has tremendous capacity and has interest in the space that you're involved in. How are you linked to that donor? Spending time creating that linkage is time well spent. Having the right person make the introduction or the ask changes the outcome of that solicitation. So finding the intersection of linkage, interest, and ability will yield tremendous results for the organization. At the top of that gift pyramid, you got to think about developing very customized strategies for each donor group, and the fundraisers or fundraiser that works in your organization. Establishing key objectives. Who's the responsible party? What type of collateral is needed for each of those groups and each individual solicitation? Defining the roles of who's going to be involved. We have an exercise we go through when we work with a client that talks about, when we've got a group of volunteers that want to be involved in fundraising. We try to find out go through a relationship mapping strategy that talks about how well connected you are to prospective donors. And sometimes there are donors that are known by a lot of different volunteers. And sometimes there are donors that are only known by one volunteer. It's pretty easy to determine how you assign that out. But making sure you don't wear out your volunteers, and also understanding your volunteers and their ability to delineate when they have a really good relationship or when their relationship might be less strong is really important. And then involving multiple volunteers in solicitations is really an art, and it's valuable to you. You can have one donor be on the call, one donor follow up with an email or a handwritten note or a phone call. It's a powerful way of utilizing your volunteers. All right, in an effort to get to the questions, let me finish up by saying, this is a lot of volunteers say, I hate asking for money. I don't like to ask for money. I'm not good at asking for money. Sometimes that comes over to the development professionals and they start thinking that. Don't get stuck in that trap. When I hear a volunteer say, I don't like to ask for money or I'm not good at it, my antenna goes up in a very positive way. When somebody says, I'm really good at asking for money, I really like to ask for money, I'm not as sure that they're as good as they think they are. So some of the best fundraisers we've worked with are folks that don't like to ask for money. And the reason is because since they don't like to do it, they don't do it very often. And when you do get that call from somebody, they haven't overused their network. So, and the other part of it is they're not asking for money. They're asking that person, that foundation, that corporation, they're asking them to co-invest with them. Because rule number one in fundraising for a volunteer is do not go ask somebody to do something you haven't already done. Don't go ask for money if you haven't made a gift. We tell that to boards and capital campaign and annual campaign committees. It's really rule number one. Make your gift first, and then you can make this very important line is join me in supporting this organization that I believe so passionately about, that I've given of my time, of my talent, and of my treasure. And they buy in. The donor can see and values emotion, excitement, and enthusiasm. So please make sure that when you're going out on those visits, that it's an exciting time. This is the fun part. It's actually the fun part of the job, is when you get to go describe your mission and what's happening and be able to share that with donors and allow them to participate in the fun of what your organization is doing.